Welcome back to Next in Leadership, the podcast. As you can see, I'm leaning back because my producer told me to, because I look more trustworthy. So the mission of Next in Leadership is really to engage the next generation of audiences, and that requires me leaning back and building my trust with each and every one of you, and I'll occasionally look into the camera just so you can see me eye to eye as well. Of course, all kidding aside, what is Next in Leadership? The mission is really to help you get the career, job, direction you wanted to go, right? My aspiration for each and every one of you, that you leave life completely fulfilled. And I know that's a balance of faith, family, and productivity. And so that is what we're going to be talking about in this Next in Leadership. It's important because each and every one of you will be filling the world with yourselves and those who you are leading. And I know that with better leaders, lives are better, and it is your generation that is going to be leading the next generation, and I am here to help invest in you with all of those who are here. You can always find us on all our socials at Next in Leadership or the website nextinleadership.com. And if you actually want a better life, all you got to do is answer a quiz. That's how it starts. If you don't want a better life, don't waste your time doing the quiz. And quite frankly, you may not want to use AI for this. I would just fill it out personally. So fill out that quiz, and that is your reason to visit. And you know what? We will help assess your progression, right? I wish I went back at that time and I could see my progression. That's what we're doing with Next in Leadership and Talent Next. You'll be seeing those things. We're back in the studio. Gotta love it. Woohoo! We'll continue with guest interviews for the next 2 weeks. Again, a podcast will be posted on Tuesday mornings on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. Video podcasts will go live at 10 a.m. on Tuesdays. So now, what is the Reed's Rant? Reed's Rant. Your favorite section. But I'm not really a ranter. Actually, I am.
I was going to say.
I knew I'd get both of you guys. See? Look at that. It's rage baiting, as they like to say. That's not about the rant. So deep expertise or broad knowledge, and it's got to be in my role. And so for me, that's really a challenge, right? So I would say that as I was progressing, that deep expertise was valuable, but I am going to 100% pick broad knowledge. And I'll tell you ultimately why in my role. So in my role as a leader, I must have broad knowledge. Why? Because if I have deep expertise in something, I will understand that thing thoroughly, but I will be then duped or tricked or fall into a trap by someone that perceives to have deep expertise, but I won't know because I don't have broad knowledge that they're actually misrepresenting the truth. So I believe I have relatively deep expertise in sales. And so I'm not often mistaken that a sales process is being delivered to me. However, I don't have deep expertise in, technology or, financial knowledge. I didn't get my CPA or these other things, but I have a broad knowledge and I have an underlying decision so that I can manage broad teams. And the bigger the organization gets, the more areas that you have to expand into, from personnel management to financial management to operational management to technology to sales. And so I am much better off having a broad knowledge in my role than having that deep expertise. First of all, understand how your deep expertise fits in the broader scope. And so when I was in college, I had an inclination for sales, as I mentioned. And there was no sales major or anything of that. I just did that on my own. And I deeply studied it. I mean, I probably read 300-400 sales books, right? Maybe more. And I practiced it, listened to certainly books on tape at the time and many other things. But then I recognized that sales was just a first part of the process and really the entry point. And then where did that go? When they signed on top of that sale, then ultimately had to deliver it, and that was operations. I had to understand financially what impact that had to the organization and how that ultimately rolled up, and then what personnel or people would need to be done. So the first thing I would tell them is look at the role that you're getting deep expertise in and how that fits in the whole economics of a business, if that's your aspiration, or even a personal life, etc. Another example, when I was in college, my major was communications. And I had a minor of economics, sociology, and English. And so I first, in kind of a side or a backstory on that is, I chose communications because I thought it was the easiest thing to do. In fact, true story, I was there at a football game at the University of Nebraska, and I saw that a lot of the athletes at the time in the 90s had communications as their major, and I said, there's got to be something to this. So I likewise selected that major. And what I recognized was that was universally available. So the major I chose had broad application. As you can see, I'm communicating right here, and I learned that communication because it has broad application. So pick a major that has deep expertise, communication, with broad application, communication. And so my minors likewise fit that same build: economics, English, and sociology. And so if you look at economics, that gave me a general understanding of how businesses work. I didn't get a doctorate in economics. That's super deep. Right, I got a general understanding and the reason I chose those minors is because I needed a certain amount of credits in those anyways, just to pass and graduate with a Bachelor of Arts. However, I also knew that if I took one more course, it would qualify as a minor. My second was English. I predominantly communicate in English. Hablo un poquito español for my Spanish listeners, but it's predominantly English. So that's why I picked that major. It's the business language as well. And then third would be sociology. And that is the one that I just kind of threw in there. But what I recognize is it's a study of people. And I understood that sociology, a lot of people get really down in a very level of deep expertise around a certain subset of people. But what I looked at is the habitual nature of humans, right? If I ask a question, you're inclined to think about the answer yourself versus making a statement. That's an example of sociology. So I formulate questions through communication in business designed to challenge the thinker to think in a way, as opposed to providing a statement that they may agree or disagree with, and they have to decide if they align with that, which is a much more finite amount of thinking. So I think if you're someone that's doing a deep expertise, to answer your direct question, find a place that you can how that attaches to the broader knowledge. And now you can see if you want to stay in that deep expertise or elevate to that broader knowledge example. And so today I want to introduce our speaker and the person that's going to jump right into the podcast right after this, and that's Dr. Lindsay Thomsen. She is a UNL professor, the director of student business development, and an assistant professor of practice. She went to UNL and UNO, and I actually met her because she was at another franchisor. That actually the owner of that franchise concept was a partner with me. And so she had great success there, and they together partnered to launch the Center for Entrepreneurship and Franchising at the University of Nebraska. So I'm excited to have you discuss and see and hear Lindsay's story as we talk about her progression and her desire to invest in the next in leadership. And so I'm excited to introduce you to Lindsay's story. And so listen and learn from here. Welcome, Lindsay Thomsen, and we're excited to have you hear her leadership journey. Welcome to Next in Leadership, the interview. Today we have Lindsay. She's going to tell us all about her leadership journey, and we're excited to hear about that. Lindsay, obviously we always start with this first question, which is, where did you see leadership traits in your early life, or did someone see those in you? Did you find them in yourself? How did your leadership journey start, and where were those first traits at?
Sure. So I think even when I was young, I would naturally have the inclination to want to take the lead, whether I was a friend group or something at school. I would be the first one to raise my hand and say, sure, pick me. I think I also had some early mentors that started to push me into some roles because they must have seen something in me and then give me feedback really early on. And I really liked that. So I think it very quickly put me on a path of I wanted to seek more of that and more of those people around me.
So why do you feel like you were inclined to raise your hand first? I mean, I think there's a lot of people that do. They're in class. They're seeing opportunities. They're the first one to volunteer. What drove you to be the first to volunteer?
I've got a psychology background. So if I did an analysis of myself, I think it's probably because the way that I grew up, I was a very early caregiver to a family environment where I had to step up and lean in and do big things, hard things, take the lead where I probably naturally wouldn't have as a child. So I think I was thrust in some of those roles, and that turned into an opportunity to have the courage and the interest to want to do big things. So I think that's actually that hard time, I think, contributed to some of my better skill sets and mindsets later on in life.
Yeah, that's a great context because I think, you cared about the outcome, right? I think some people volunteer because they want the acclaim. You cared, it sounds like, about the result, and you knew that you could more likely lead that outcome or result, right? Because you said, okay, someone's got to do it, and I care enough for the result. And I think that's an early leadership trait, is saying, I care enough about the result that I'm going to take the lead. I got enough on my plate already, or I know this is a lot of work, but at the same time, as I care so much about the outcome that I want to make sure that it's there, and that kind of fostered that early along. And so you saw, and then I assume in that caregiving situation, you saw success and impact, right? Was that something that happened once you were stepping into that, whether by default or by choice you raised your hand or you fell into that role, you saw impact of that concern and care. Was that what continued to
Yeah.
foster your leadership
Yeah,
early
impact
traits?
and outcome. I definitely started to realize, oh, the more that I leaned in and took charge, something happened. But then the reverse of that is I realized that if I tried to do it just by myself, I could go really far. But then the whole adage, I could probably go farther if I actually had more people around me. So I think I had to undo some of that as I kept going. I thought I needed to do it all by myself with what I was learning as a kid. And then I realized, wait, if I surround myself with better people, I'm going to be able to do this better. So I actually had to unlearn some of that thinking, even though it was getting really good outcomes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are in that place. And so since you have a psychology background, maybe we'll do that. Why psychologically do you feel like we have to do that, right? We just put the pressure on ourselves and we have to unlearn it, right? I mean, what is it psychologically that makes us, because I do the same thing, right? It's like, if it's got to be, it's me, and there's nobody else, right? And so psychologically, why do we do that as entrepreneurs and leaders? And then we have to unlearn some of that. What do you think?
Yeah. I think there's almost a bit of a dichotomy there. People are either wired like what you were just saying in the camp that I'm at, like I'm all in, I'm going to go, like get out of the way, I'll do it. Or it's maybe somebody's been so protected that they don't do it at all because everybody else did it for them. Granted, there's probably lots of different camps, but I see people and tend to go into one of them. I just leaned into the category where it's like, get out of the way, that I'm just going to do it myself. But it does come with unlearning because it can't always be my way. I'm not always right. There probably is a better way of going about it. If I did it in a team structure, we're probably going to go farther. Whereas I'm sure there's just as much unlearning on the other side of, oh, wait, I should lean in. I should step up. So I'm sure that there's learning and unlearning on both sides.
Yeah, and I think for me, when I was just doing that, it's like I knew that the risk of failure was generally on me as the leader.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to turn over that risk of failure to somebody else, right? Because of that, if I'm going to lose, I remember even as a point of context, I played football in high school, and I was like, I care about practice more than my teammates. I can't do this. So I stepped into wrestling. I'm like, if I'm going to lose, it's going to be 100% my fault, and that was the case. And I got better. And I think sometimes, at the same time as we can't just have that independent, and it's certainly, more people watch football than wrestling because they want to see a team win. And there's a lot of things that lean into that. So then obviously now you saw this early leadership trait stepping in there. You had to develop self, kind of leading self well, right? Because we can't lead others or organizations if we don't have good self leadership. So what are some early self leadership principles that you learned or started applying in the way that you started managing and leading yourself as you matured as a leader?
So you just outlined my first career chapter, because my first career chapter was a therapist in private practice for 10 years. And I knew in order to help people, I needed to help myself because I was a walking billboard for what I could do as a therapist. And if I wasn't doing very well with myself and I didn't have my own stuff together, I was going to look like it. And people were going to be like, why would I go and listen to her whatsoever? So I really quickly learned I always needed to take care of me because I was a walking billboard for what I was able to do for others. So I really honed that in. I had unbelievable mentors around me that always look back on me. And there's one lady, she would just kind of put her little hand on her finger on her hand and she'd just look at me. And I knew that meant like, are you sure? Do you want to think about that more? So I was constantly going back into this reflection of, what am I thinking? Is what I'm thinking best? Do I need to take a beat? So I think that chapter really helped me to realize I always need to be taking care of myself in order to be able to take care of people around me. And that really, I think, went on then entrepreneurially of I'll be a really good leader and teammate if I'm taking care of myself, then people will want to follow me. And again, then that proved out entrepreneurial wise for me as well.
Yeah, and I've done quite a few of these interviews, and said in a very similar way as everyone's like, I learned the power of self-evaluation. Someone reminded me, they tapped on this. Self-evaluate here is what she was essentially saying. Pause, self-evaluate, Lindsay. And what happens is if we wait until someone else evaluates us, we're never going to be the leader. If we can put those checks and balances and self-evaluate early and adjust our abilities, that is going to empower us as a leader. And so, what are some ways that you were, when you were thinking about that and you're saying, was I right or wrong there? Sometimes we go straight to the book. Sometimes we look at what someone else is doing, and sometimes we just try to figure it out. But there's a balance in between. And so we want to have that 360 evaluation saying, am I doing what's right? And did you think about that in the moment of the decisions you were making and what broader impact? Because sometimes this is what I want, but it necessarily won't lead to the long-term benefit. Or sometimes this is what the long-term benefit wants, but it doesn't, work for me. So is there a way that you did that self-evaluation? If someone's listening and they may have, they don't have that mentor tapping on their thing that had trained them, what would be some early things you'd say? If you're doing a self-evaluation about something that is, you take a step back and relook at that, what's a way to appropriately evaluate your perspective on that and then ultimately be able to shift?
So I'm already a very naturally self-aware person. I'm constantly introspective, good and bad, going in and constantly analyzing. But I think the balance of that is feedback, seeking out feedback. I'm constantly curating people around me. If they're not strong enough, that might not be the right word, capable, interested, willing to give me feedback, you're probably not going to help me grow. It's not that I'll remove you from my life entirely, but you're probably not going to sit in my board of directors to actually help me grow as a person. So constantly bringing in people that are different from me, see something differently, and that are willing to say, hey, Lindsay, I'm noticing something. Can I give you some feedback? Because if somebody's willing to do that and they care that much and they're going to courageously say, hey, I'm going to give you some feedback. I mean, clearly it's gold. Whether I agree with it, disagree with it, there's probably some granule of truth in that then I can go back to do some more self-awareness with. And nowadays, stick it into chat and say, hey, turn him into a thought partner and say, I just heard this. I just learned this. What do you think? What do you think of that? Or how can I look at that from different perspectives? So I like the feedback. I think it actually helps with my awareness.
Yeah, I love that. So one, seek feedback, right? And seek feedback from people that have either been further down that road or that care about your development.
Yeah.
Not necessarily care about the outcome, because they'll drive you to that outcome and it may stifle your development, right? They may get an economic return on that. They may get some benefit from that, and they'll give you feedback that'll direct that. But back to the point where you started, you cared about the outcome. That's why you took a leadership role.
Yeah.
And so find someone that cares about your development, not an outcome, and then they will be a great advisor. And so now, as you begin to have self-evaluation techniques and learn that, you started leading others. And so you first stepped into that role of leading others, which is different than leading self, right? I mean, your evaluation criteria is different than their evaluation criteria themselves, and you got to make that work. So when you first started leading others, what are some of the things you learned early on or challenges you had or would advise others who are starting to lead others?
Well, I think it depends on what the other is. I mean, there's a difference between when I owned a business and those were people that worked for me, or if I'm in a classroom, they don't work for me. In fact, they don't have to do anything that I ask them to do. But even within like a partnership or a marriage, I mean, that's all leading. And I feel like there's differences throughout, but it all starts in the same place, and it goes back to me, like, how am I showing up to have people actually want to listen to me and want to be led? Because it's that adage, if you think you're leading and you turn around and nobody's behind you, then you're really not leading anyone. So again, it goes back to what am I doing? How am I going about it? Just using my words better. I'll always lean in hard. I won't be afraid of hard conversations. But then, Lindsay, how is your delivery? Are you saying it at the right time? Are you using the right words? So building up people in the right space so they want to keep following me. They want to be on the team. So I think it's demonstrating just how am I leading, not leading all the time. I think I'm learning, the older I'm getting, is when do I need to take more of a followership role and giving other people around me the opportunity to lead, because then they feel really good and I might learn something from them as well. Even in the classroom, I mean, there are some unbelievable leaders that I can learn things from that are 20 and 21. It's like, gosh, I really like the way that you did that. I might actually add that to my repertoire. So knowing when to take the followership response, and then being willing to change my mind, speak up, but then being able to say, I really like your perspective. I hadn't considered that. I think I might actually change my opinion on that. I never considered it from that perspective. That seems to go really well leading others, because they recognize that you're human, that you're willing to make changes and accommodate and be part of something bigger, and that it's not a top-down thing. At least that has seemed to work well for me.
Yeah, I think the first part of that you said is exactly right. Study the audience. It could be a student, right? And I've been in environments where you are the leader, the teacher, and you've I agree, there's a lot of talent that's in that room that you can learn from, but also they need leadership and direction. And so it's clear where you're like, hey, yes, you're categorically, you have a great idea, but structurally, here's, things my experience would be able to benefit you for, and you're leading that environment. So I think one, study the audience, or two, I know you've worked in large organizations before, and
Mhm.
you're saying, hey, I am a higher level leader, but there's a higher level above me, and there's leaders that are certainly brand new and getting started. And so what is the audience I'm communicating with as I'm leading others? And
Yeah.
and to your point, leading others you're leading from a little bit lower than the top tier of the organization to
Yeah.
leading people that are below you in the organization. And so study who you're leading others with, and then craft what you're saying and doing, right? And I always say this as a leader. Our job as a leader is to go to the level they're at.
Yeah.
We don't communicate from our level because they may or may not. I don't have a doctorate like you do. So you start saying a whole bunch of terms, I'm going to get lost. But thank you for communicating at my level. I appreciate that, Lindsay. Communicating in psychological terms I can understand. And I think that's our job as a leader, right? Is to adjust based on that audience. And we leverage our intuition to do that as well. And then I think the other thing you said in there is so true. Lead with empathy,
Yeah.
right? Is, hey, I'm listening to you. And you know what? I've thought through that. I may not change my tech, but I'm willing to. Right? Because of your information. And that's empathy. That's saying that I haven't lived the life that you've lived. Maybe it's different generation. Maybe
Yeah.
it's different circumstances. I can't see that perspective. But because of you sharing, I have now changed my perspective. And that is gravitating. Leaders that lead with empathy and that understand that and are willing to adjust their ideology are going to get more followers.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, the other thing will happen is the others will adjust their mindset because you adjusted yours.
Right. I would
Because
agree with that.
if you're closed-minded, they're naturally going to be closed-minded. If you're
Right.
open-minded, they're more inclined to be open-minded, right? And that's how that absolutely works. So that's great as to leading others. And then as you let others and and you're getting more and more people, and it's different each and every year. And maybe we'll talk about this because I know you've done teaching in a classroom setting. At least that's what I've seen. I've been able to speak at your class. How have you seen from the first time you led a class to now where it's at as you get toward that leading organizational phase? What is preparing you from leading others to leading an organization at a much larger scale, right? Because the whole entrepreneurship program is a key part of what you're daily responsible for, but you have to master leading others in a classroom to have the ability to lead an organization or a division of an organization.
That's interesting because I think we've actually already talked about it. From the very first semester, we were just coming off COVID. I taught with a mask on. The students they were maxed out themselves. I was new to teaching. And now it's been 5 years, but the one consistent thing that I've done every single semester is I read those course evaluations word for word. I'm constantly looking for trends. So then by the next semester, is there something that is constant? It's like, what am I supposed to gain from that? What are the highs? What are the lows? I curate that knowledge and that information as if it's a gift. Because it is. I mean, any student that's willing to actually fill those out is saying, I care enough that I'm willing to take the time to actually give you feedback. And I have grown so much from reading those course evaluations every single semester that I have grown so much as not just a teacher, but I think just as a person, because there's also that coaching mentor role in there as well. And I've really learned a lot in the last 5 years just by reading that feedback. It goes back to feedback, like we said before.
And being humble enough to receive it, and then also understanding the context of the audience, because I'm sure by then you know the student. If it's not anonymous, you know the student and what their perspective would be, and listening and being willing to change. They're only sending that feedback because you've demonstrated in the classroom that when they share their feedback, if it's appropriate, you're willing and able to change going forward. And that's a key part of leading others. And you never stop, right? I mean, I think that sometimes leaders get, this worked for me up to this point, but I'm going to stop doing it now. Right now, I've been here 5 years, so I don't need to read these course evaluations anymore. Right. I've read it the last 4 years. No, I think they keep those habits. That's back to that leading self going forward. And so now I know the vision is to continue to build the entrepreneurship program at the University of Nebraska. And that's going to be a large organization. I have the benefit of partnering with a student that you had in your classroom that's carrying that all the way forward. And so that'll have multi-generational, hopefully that's what my aspiration is, and I'm sure it's his too, to expand what, when you transition from leading others to organizations, right? There's a lot of more structural and system decisions that need to be made instead of direct correspondence with a direct individual. So where have you seen that your leadership journey evolve as you're leading with systems and processes that are organizationally driven versus leading people and others right there in a moment? Have you seen any early learnings or things that you would share with the audience that they could take?
So I'd say that the one thing that I'm probably personally struggling with and learning from, it's my opportunity of the decade, is where do you draw the line between responsibility and control? What do I have control over? What can I take responsibility for? University of Nebraska is the largest employer in the state of Nebraska. You couldn't be more different from being an entrepreneur over a really, really small franchise organization back in the time. So what worked here does not work here. So to learn to adapt and to figure out what's my domain, where can I control, and where can I really impact outcomes, and then where don't I, and where do I have to then just be okay with that and not try to plan a space. But then also, not to add another but in that, not being afraid to find the opportunities where I could actually change something, even though it's a huge system, being willing and being courageous to have big conversations with the dean or a director of a department to say, I think I see an opportunity and I think we need to lean in, and it's not comfortable, but where do I really want to lean in and try to actually change something? And then where do I need to take a step back and say, Lindsay, I don't think this is your domain. Keep focused on where you can control and make a really good impact there. So I think that's where I'm currently learning in my professional stage.
Yeah, and I think that's all of us, right? I mean, I am also an entrepreneur, and I see a lot of problems every day. That's just I see an opportunity for me to fix it. And then I realized, wait a minute, what is the greatest leverage of my time, availability, and influence?
Right.
And I would use the word influence instead of control, because sometimes we say control. And so when do you need to use your influence or have influence? And where is your influence? It's just not going to have the same impact as it would somewhere else. And so we want to leverage our influence. And, to encourage you, I would say the thing to never lose sight of, even in an educational environment, and I went to the University of Nebraska, as you know, have a family of teachers, my mom, my wife, my daughter, and there are things that are naturally outside of the control of the teacher, right? There is a Department of Education in the federal government that they're also getting mandates from, right? Because they're a public university, and so they can't even influence those. At the same time, I recognize and I sit back as a student of all these organizations, and the change actually happens in the student. Now, the challenge is it's not immediate.
Yeah.
Right? It's long-term, and we don't get that benefit as a leader of immediate gratification. We have to wait sometimes decades and sometimes never. And so
I would agree with that. Having taught for 5 years, I'm starting to see those pearls of wisdom come back in just really sweet emails or messages or LinkedIn posts like, hey, I was in your class 3 years ago and you said this and it led me here. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. And it's those things that remind me of, if I just influence in the class, if I just focus on what I'm responsible for and not get too outside my domain, it keeps me very motivated and passionate and connected to what the outcome I'm actually trying to have versus what I can't control.
Yeah. So then back to the domain of the environments that you can't control is you preserve your ability to have that impact, right? Saying that, hey, deans, administrators, in order for me to have the impact I need to have, these are the things that we need. And I think that's where there's mutual alignment, right? I mean, I'm sure the deans and I'm sure the administrators would want the student to thrive, post their graduation at the University of Nebraska and in any number of environments. And so I think that's where the balance comes in. And I sit in that same thing. And I always tell my kids, don't argue with the TSA, right? There's no benefit. You can say, yeah, no, yes, no. There's really no benefit, but understand that's just a pass through. Right. And so we understand some doors we just have to walk through and, okay, get me through here as quickly as possible. And that's the administration talk. But then look at on the other side of that, you have the freedom to travel anywhere you want. Right. And I think that's what the TSA is. And so we have to recognize, what is the TSA and where's the destination? And so which doors do we just have to empty our pockets, take off our shoes, stand in line, and then where do we have the free to fly? And that's organizational decisions, right? And so in our organization, because it's everywhere, and I think this is a relatable, there are security licensure requirements that I think are just stupid. I'll give an example. Why do we have 50 different everybody has a driver's license, but all 50 states have a different approach to getting it, and it's oriented differently and everything. It seems to me there could be a universal driver's license, right? Sure. And that's just an example of bureaucracy. And as you move from state to state, you got to go refile for a driver's license to get a new location, et cetera. And those seem like bureaucracy at the same time as just pay your 45, 55, whatever the fee is for it, and get your 4-year driver license or 5 years and move on. And so we can fight that and really worry about it, or we can just accept it and recognize what's really important is us driving to the destination we want to go. And so I think if we get too fixated on those things that are just those milestones, we can get lost, even organizationally. And then I actually embrace it in my leadership role. I say, I will be the best to perform within those required parameters, the licensure in the case of security, and then as opposed to fight them.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's where, again, organizational leadership is I look at sports. The power of sports is actually in the rules and the sidelines that are defined. Right. And so we have, I have a student, his name's Derek Branch, that you've had, and he was a former football player. And we were just having this conversation. He said, what's your role? What's my role? I said, I'm going to give you the playbook. And he goes, I'm going to make the playbook come alive. I said, exactly. I said, you go make the tackle. I said, make sure they don't score a touchdown. He's like, that's exactly what I'm going to operate. And I think that's how we lead organizationally. We're like, hey, here's the sidelines. Here's where the fouls are. Here's the play we're trying to run. I realize when it's live action, it's going to change. So do the best you can. And then, but more importantly, finish the play. And I think that's exactly how you lead organizationally. We get the infrastructure, we get the structure. We say, hey, here's where it's at. I'm going to teach you how to be the best. We're going to practice every day. We're going to lift weights. We're going to jump high. We're going to run fast. We're going to watch film. But now it's the game's on, right? And go make the play. And then encourage. I think that's our role on that organization on the other side to do that going forward. And to me, that's what the Next in Leadership is all about, is then you change the world that way. You change the world one player at a time, one play at a time, and then they start compounding going forward. And so, Lindsay, where do you see your leadership journey going from here, right? Where do you see the impact of that going? I mean, you have hundreds of kids that you're engaged with each and every year that are going to be the leaders of the next generation. Where do you see your leadership journey going and the impact you're having in their lives?
So I'm getting closer to this next decade upon me, which has a 5 in it, which makes me feel older. But I'm embracing it because the one thing that's coming with that is we have 3 grandkids. They're all 2-year-old toddlers. And it's making me think about leadership in a different way, more legacy versus my personal outcome, but a legacy outcome. So what can I do to actually help the next generation and no longer just about me? And I've been there for the last couple of years of really making that transition. And I still think I've got a couple of years to really figure out, what does that look like? What does it look like for me to maybe pull back from even more? Where do I then do more? Do I go about it differently? But I think it's more about legacy now, and how do I actually impact others? And it's really no longer about me and my role and my title and where I'm trying to get.
That's awesome. Well, I think you have a lot of value to offer, and the legacy is sitting in those classrooms. Just to encourage you again, because I know how hard it is to be a teacher. I've been in your classrooms. I know the variety of students that you have coming in. Their focus is varied. Their application, the information, their retention, of the information is also varied. So that's challenging at the same time as if you just get one. It only takes one to change the world, right? And then that one becomes many more. Keep and maintain that your focus. So as we're wrapping this up, what is a closing comment or quote? If there's somebody listening and they're early in their leadership journey and they're ready to get started, what would you tell them to apply today? If you could say, hey, I've learned this over time, go do this today and you'll be better off for it. What would you say, Lindsay?
I think you and I have already probably touched upon my biggest favorite hits when it comes to leadership. One is empathy. The world would be different if everybody just watched Ted Lasso and actually practiced everything they got from Ted Lasso. The world would be a different place. Anything by Brene Brown, just learning empathy, learning what it is, what it isn't, know how to practice it, get better in that every single day. It would change humanity and the way that we would connect and communicate. And then I think it's kind of more Adam Grant's work. I love all of his books on being willing to change your mind. You know, what I thought 20 years ago, I don't think those anymore. I've evolved. Thank goodness I have. I would never want to get stuck where I was 20 years ago. And I've had to change my mind on a lot of different things because of experiences and things I've been exposed to. So be willing to change your mind. And I think the young leadership, the young leaders from that 20 to 25, they're right in that quarter life crisis. They're going from, this is the way that I was raised, to, but this is my next future. What do I need to let go because I don't want to bring it forward? What do I want to start doing? It's a really fun time in your life if you surround yourself with people to say, is this who you want to be, or is that who you want to be? Be willing to just change your opinions and your minds and your beliefs, whether you're a quarter life crisis or even still in your 40s and entering 50s. Like, just be willing to change your mind. And then again, do it with empathy and get along with humans.
Yeah, empathize and evolve, right? If we could just
Yeah.
do those two things today, empathize with others, they're different people, then evolve as you go through your quarter life to half life to beyond as we
Right.
are. I'm at the half life too,
Yeah.
because we're going to live to our 100. So, we're only at halfway there. So
Right.
empathize and evolve. And so thank you for all of you who are listening. And thank you, Lindsay, for sharing your insights. It's been a great episode of Next in Leadership, the interview. We appreciate all your insights, and we will empathize and evolve. Thank you, Lindsay. And we'll see you next time on the Next in Leadership, the interview.